Welcome to Chronic Curiosity, where we have real conversations with real people, from everything to anything, in attempts to facilitate dialogue with our fellow humans, and hopefully your curiosity as well as ours. If you can withstand the show, we ask, most importantly, that you tell your friends and family, but also you can pick up some merch or just donate to the show at chronic-curiosity.com in USD or Bitcoin. If you feel so obliged, you can give us a good rating and follow on whatever podcast platform you so choose. But please feel free to reach out to us on the website or the socials, which can also be found on the website, chronic-curiosity.com. And here we go. Yeah, so we can make this quick, but incidentally, Paul and Zishan are here getting ready to do something with Toni. So I'll just let you guys, because I don't really understand. I caught pieces of it naturally as you guys were talking, so I understand the gist of it. And Toni's kind of talked a little bit about it before, but I don't even think I've gotten the whole rundown from Toni. What exactly you guys are doing and looking towards to do.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested in getting the rundown from a person that doesn't understand.
Paul, can you reintroduce yourself? And Z, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I mean, bottom line is this. My name is Paul Moss, and effectively several years ago, I literally wheezed when I tied my shoe. And
I don't think we talked about that before. I didn't realize you were that overweight.
Yeah, I was like 270.
We've got some pictures.
275. Yeah, it was ugly. For me, I just didn't feel good. I didn't look good. I looked unhealthy. I literally looked 15 years older than I look right now. And I went the exercise diet style, and I crushed it on those two. Cardiovascularly, I crushed it, etc. Labs wise, crushed it, but I couldn't lose the weight. And then talked with Toni, and I told him I'm sick of this, and he said you should try these GLPs. And I did, and 70 pounds later, and now over a year later, the weight's still off, and I started to see what Toni gave to me, pretty prevailing in advertising and media. And I realized that a lot of customers, patients, overweight people, obese people in my position, we're going to get a lot of misinformation, not get the touch, and not get the hand holding and the necessary requirements that Toni gave me. And so I went to Toni. I said, Toni, we gotta help out we gotta help people out.
Give the people what they want.
Yeah, seriously. So, and Toni's Toni's a nurse practitioner. For those who don't know, am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Licensed.
Yeah. I reference him all the time when I'm talking about medical shit that I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm like, Toni, he knows the big words. He knows the stuff.
Yeah.
He's the guy.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and Toni's not just, he doesn't just know the big words. He doesn't look at the world the same way as most of the practitioners and clinicians. He looks at it, really differently.
How to apply them.
Yeah. And so, talk to him about the feasibility of it. And then we had some glaring weaknesses. How do we get the message out? And how do we build the platform so that people can get through the platform and get what they need? And so Zishan joined the team.
Introduce yourself, Z.
Yeah, so I actually joined in towards after you guys had already thought about, created the idea a little bit. I knew Paul. I worked for him, and then we worked together. And I had heard of GLPs just because marketing being my profession, I'm just generally attracted to and like to see the inner workings of how ads work. And you were seeing GLPs all over the place, or you were starting to at least.
Yeah.
And then we talked about them, and you really helped me understand that what's being marketed out there, what's being advertised, isn't necessarily the core message or the core benefit, and it may not be done responsibly as well. So those two things really enticed me to to join the project that we had, because if we can get the message out there better than it's being done currently, this is not just a fad diet, hop on, get your shake weight out kind of deal, and we can also educate, where we're empowering people to understand what they're putting in their body. Just because you can eat less doesn't mean you can get away with eating crap still. Those forms of advertising, getting real marketing material out there that's educational, informative, beneficial, that stuff really entices me. So that's when I joined on, and we are still in the semi-beginning stages of getting rolled out, but extremely exciting stuff.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of times too where there's marketing and then there's sales.
Sure.
Right. And oftentimes those two things are combined naturally.
Sure.
Right. But there seems at least to me, and maybe I have more of maybe not necessarily pessimistic view on it. But everyone's always trying to sell you something instead of, and it seems like I also kind of want to ask some questions about basically just the whole business approach to what you guys are doing. Cause it seems like it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Than,
I want to.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. There's something there that's definitely different. Trying to advance in the times, but instead of marketing, to me, it doesn't have to be. I'm just trying to sell you something so I make money off of it. But what you just said, it seems like all right. We want to is more of an educational approach to the marketing.
Yeah,
which I think is really important because if you have a good product, if you have a good thought or idea, then it really should sell itself if you can be honest about it, right?
Sure.
So like to me, like that's where is it like not kind of interlocking those gray lines of, well, it's 70% true what I'm saying, or it's all true what I'm saying. I'm just leaving out the other percentages of stuff that don't help sell the item. So I think that's super important. That I've heard you say like misinformation, which it's one of those buzzwords, now
Sure.
naturally so. But usually people take that with some kind of disgust, But if you can point out and stay away from misinformation while marketing, that's impressive.
Yeah, two things on that. So I think most people are pretty pessimistic about advertising or marketing because largely it's done wrong, not because we don't have smart people in the field, but just because ads actually aren't annoying. They're only annoying if they're not relevant to you. We would all be, love to walk down an airport and you want water right now, and an ad pops up that says water here, and you can afford it, and you would love that ad. But in the same position, you wouldn't necessarily love an ad for a BMW because I'm thirsty. So that's one thing. And then the second part of that is, I think truth in advertising really comes from, can you give your consumer all of the information they need to make an informed decision? The rest is up to your sales team and your actual product to sell itself. The best you can do in marketing, really morally and ethically, is give your consumer all the tools they need to make the best decision for themselves. And that's really what we've combined here.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk more about what we're actually, the product itself or the service.
Yeah. Can we, are we allowed to say the name of our company?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love that.
So
that clicks.
So there's a
the marketing's like, yeah,
no, I
please
just wanted to make sure we were at that stage. So there's a fourth partner, fourth pillar in our company, Pillars for Health. And his name is Jason. And what's I know he does computers, but what's his actual title? What would you say?
Architect engineer.
Okay, and he's good. He's
Good.
very good. Touch on the Tb2 because I think you came up with that, correct? Explain that a little bit.
So effectively, it's not just losing weight, it's not just vanity, and so the whole concept behind Tb2 was a comprehensive body transformation. And so effectively, we want people not just to lose weight. We obviously, because of all the comorbidities that are tied with overweight and obesity, we want people to lose weight, right? Because it helps them, but we also want them to have a sustaining lifestyle moving forward. And so from our perspective, it's a total body, it's a 360 body, so that they don't just make a 6-month, period of their life be isolated to that 6 months. We want that 6 months to parlay into the rest of their life.
So is it? You said Tb2. Is that the name of the company?
We are a Pillars for Health. This is our parent company that does
Gotcha.
business as TB2.
I gotcha. Okay.
And so one of the I don't want to say issue, but things I see like as a clinician is I have very limited time to see patients, and patients have very limited time to be able to commit to an appointment or um go and figure out how to get labs or things like that. And so our idea was, how do we kind of streamline this? How do we make this easier? How do we make it more accessible? How do we keep, sometimes things like sexual issues, hair loss, weight loss can be embarrassing. And so how do we keep those things discreet? And so we have kind of the face to face if you want it. We have the telehealth if you want it, but we also have something called like an asynchronous appointment. And those asynchronous appointments are becoming more and more popular where you don't really have to have a face to face. You enter in your information, we verify that it's actually you, collect the past medical history, drug allergies. There's certain contraindications which would disqualify you, but basically you're entering in all the information. You have the of you have you can basically talk to a physician if you want via text, but they can look at all that information without ever sitting down and having a 20 or 30-minute appointment with you. They can follow up with certain questions, and then if it makes sense to prescribe this medication, they can prescribe the medication. We partnered with compounding pharmacies for a couple reasons. Number one, they're incredibly expensive medications. So out of pocket, we're talking anywhere from like $1,000 to $1,800 a month.
It's pretty steep.
It's pretty steep. And so these compounding pharmacies are able to kind of produce these medications at a more affordable rate, so we can offer them at a more affordable rate. The other thing that we wanted to avoid was these medications originally are for diabetics, and everybody wants them. There's just what did you say, Paul? Overweight, obesity, 75% of the United States. So everyone wants these medications. We don't want to contribute to a shortage of these medications for diabetics. And so that's another reason why we're going through the compounding pharmacies to get these medications. But basically, we've kind of figured out a way that things are still discreet, things are still affordable, and we can actually get you the medications.
I would say it sounds like a good idea because I know one of the biggest things with, as a guy, and just personally me, like I don't want to go to the doctor. I don't want to go like see anybody. I want to sit down and talk. Like even if I had the time, which a lot of people, like you said, don't.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I got to drive 45 minutes and then I got to sit here in front of this doctor, tell him that, I'm embarrassed, my hair's falling out or my wiener don't work or, whatever it is. It's like, if we can, it seems the way everything is shifting too. Cause I've heard you talk a little bit about AI and different things. And I've even heard some discussions recently about how they've done some studies where AI's, what was it? It was they're able to diagnose effectively, like
more
it's like 175% more efficiently than a typical physician.
Yep.
And it's like, well, it makes sense because all it is just a computation. You put here's all your things, and is the more information you have from somebody, likely the more you're going to be able to find out. But if you're able to do that from a remote location, and be honest with the person, and not have to travel, well, then sounds like the business model would make sense.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, that's what our platforms are like. It's built on an AI platform, and, the information is fed through and it sees multiple sets of eyes. And so, it's going to disqualify you if you, enter a contraindication. Also, there's going to be, a board certified clinician that's going to lay eyes on your information too,
Right.
just so nothing slips through the cracks.
Yeah, there is a checks and balances system for the clinicians, and it delivers the content and the treatment to the patient in the way that they want it to be delivered to them when they want it to be delivered to them. So it's set up to accommodate the user, the person who needs the help. And I'm with you. Even though you could see I was overweight, and when I was 270, I didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
I don't care. People get a check engine light. They don't want to go to their mechanic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, oh, this, if nothing else, it's like, this is a pain in the
Yeah.
ass. Like, I know I got to
Right.
go do this. I got to jump
Right.
through the hoops. I had to do this. Same with my wife's vehicle this week. Like, I used to fix my own cars, but now cars are getting too complex. There, it's like, all right, I can't always do this myself.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, man, like, I got to call the place and then
Right.
I got to figure out what day works. And then we got to figure out how to get it there. Like,
And
you
the
know,
trust,
yep.
and do I have to go to someone else and get, quotes?
Yeah.
And it's just, it's a headache, and people are so willing to forego their own symptoms and their own bodies. And what we wanted to do is don't do that anymore, because literally you're shortening your life. Right. And so we wanted to give people a way that they could communicate with us and get the help they needed without having to be embarrassed or having to go through rigmarole, hoops, etc.
Yeah.
We made
Don't
it
wait till you have to
simple.
go to the ER for a heart attack, or until you have pre-type,
All of it.
pre-diabetes or whatever it might be. Don't wait.
Yeah.
The biggest thing for me is, we talked about asynchronous visits a little bit, but the biggest thing for me is in your example too. I mean, yeah, you go to the doctor, you set the scheduling aside. Even once you get there, the majority of the time you're waiting in a room.
Right.
You're not actually.
Yeah.
There's nothing happening.
Yeah. Just letting your anxiety build for
Exactly.
something you don't want to have to be there for anyways.
Yeah, so even during COVID, like, a lot of medical visits moved to, having a video call, but those are still synchronous. So if I want somebody to talk to now, I'm going to wait a week, schedule with them. If something comes up, now I have to schedule for a week out again. With asynchronous visits, the beautiful thing is it's around your time completely, and you have the ability to know that the response you get is still going to be, like you mentioned, from somebody that is a trained, licensed physician. So it's the same end result, but it's more scheduled to your time. That biggest problem for me is scheduling any primary care physician appointments or whatever it may be is the wait. I don't want to go there and wait for an hour staring at a vanilla wall for 45 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
So.
Let me input my stuff and get back to me.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing. You have to repeat your information, right?
Yeah.
The nurse, first you have the intake form.
Yeah.
Then you have the nurse recollect all the information, ask you all the same questions, and then the clinician asks you all the same questions again.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, so you do that 3 times, while you wait, and that's mind blowing. The other thing is, even to get to that appointment, which is annoying in its own. So, let's say you're trying to lose weight. So you go, and you go to your general practitioner, right? And then they get you to a specialist. That process can take 6 months to 8 months, right?
And then even if you get there and they prescribe the medication,
Yeah.
and insurance might cover it, you might need a prior authorization, which requires more time, or there might be a step process, as we mentioned before, where we got to try metformin first before we get to the GLPs.
Yep.
And it's just, how do we get rid of all that bullshit and bring it right to the consumer?
Yeah. We were done. I mean, that's like, I had something most people don't have, which is I had access to Toni, right? Who was able to tell me, hey friend, here's what you do. Most of the planet doesn't have access to Toni.
Right.
Yeah.
We tried to
Not
get
yet.
accessibility, right, to the people who can help as easy as possible.
Yeah. To be able to make that efficient.
If you're going to be one thing,
Hey, yeah, you'd be efficient.
There you go.
Right. I feel like I just like, so are you going to invest? Boats and hoes.
This is the exact pitch we're taking to Shark Tank.
Right.
So basically, this is pre-Shark Tank.
There you go. Okay. You get you warmed up.
yeah. But what is it? November? We're supposed to launch in like 5 states off the rip.
Yeah.
And then the sky's the limit after that.
When I read 75% of people had the same problem I had in America, that blew my mind, right? And our solution isn't for kids, but you see this happening so much earlier in the life cycle and the process now, in terms of the starts of being overweight or obese. I'm just excited that we get to actually like help people in the right way, and not help people in the fad diet, yo-yo diet way.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing too is like, if children emulate their parents. And so if you've got parents that are healthier, that have lost weight, that have good eating habits and improved activity levels, like hopefully that translates down into younger generations, which then overall reduces that 75% number of overweight and obesity.
Yeah.
Funny
What-
you mentioned that. Now this is just turning into me picking your brain hair a little bit. But could that also play a role into if you don't have kids yet, but you want to have better epigenetics for when you are going to have kids? Could you be in better shape and maybe pass that on a little bit better than if you were, let's say you got pregnant while you were obese or
Yeah.
overweight?
Yeah, 100%. I definitely believe that. The other thing is I have patients that like they'll have a kid and during pregnancy they were already like pre-pregnancy they were overweight
Oh.
and it was so much rougher on them with that extra weight. And so before they have their next kid, they're trying to lose 50 pounds, 60 pounds because they know that pregnancy is going to be easier.
And that makes sense. I guess that's a good point too, is how much or do you talk about like lifestyle changes too? Because that's a big one, particularly I think in the United States where it's, I think there's a lot of education that people don't receive and understanding of what they're putting into their bodies. Naturally, I think there's people that need, that extra help to do certain A, B, or C. But there's a lot of it that stems from, that outside of, genetics and whatnot, but there's that, it's like, well, my mom and dad always used to cook this way with this certain, and always overweight. And then, they have kids and that just continues to perpetuate. And if you live a certain lifestyle for 30, 40 years, it's much harder just to break that rather than teach a kid a new lifestyle.
Right.
And never to fall into that, constantly eating fast food for 3 meals a day, that type of thing. How much of that is kind of also kind of wrapped
So
up
here's
into
here's the
this?
coolest thing. So let's take conventional wisdom, right? How do you lose weight? Well, you take in less calories, right? And so you can do that by eating less. You can do that by burning more calories, right? You eat healthier foods that have, less sugars or fats or whatever it may be, right? This is all conventional wisdom, right? Been out there. It's been branded 8 billion ways, historically speaking, right? The coolest thing about this is it's the cheat code to actually make that realistic. So the reality is when you're a certain weight, right? Your body is, and let's say you lose weight, okay? Let's say you go conventional diet, whatever, and you lose the weight. Your brain is saying, hey, if there's a famine, if there's, if you have to survive for the winter without food, that extra weight was actually good. So let's go get that weight back, right? So you're fighting this argument with your brain, right? To get you back to the weight, even if you lose it. This is the cheat code because effectively what it does is it doesn't allow you to take in as many calories as you would normally. And because if you don't take in the right calories, your body won't feel good, you'll feel fatigued, then you're forced to eat cleaner, eat a little bit better. Otherwise, you're just not going to feel good. So it literally is the cheat code to conventional wisdom.
Right. So how, I guess to that point, how does that work? Is there some sort of, obviously it's rewiring, I think is just the first word I can come up with, to where it kind of retrains your body how to respond and react to food, and how does it work? What is it? Because I don't think we've really touched on what specifically you guys are doing.
Yeah. So in terms of how the GLPs kind of work, or like why it causes you to
because I know a little bit about it, but I don't think we really covered it.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Yeah.
So what is it that you're doing as far as the specific care that you're giving?
So the specific care outside of kind of advisement of activity levels and diet per se is the prescription of GLP medications. So those GLP medications are glucagon-like peptides. You already possess some of those glucagon-like peptides or GLPs in your body naturally. And so basically they mimic the hunger hormones in our body. The idea is, let's introduce some more of these from the outside so that you are less hungry, so that your pancreas is more effective to break down carbohydrates, so that blood sugars are better controlled. And these medications work in those ways. They produce more insulin, they control blood sugar better, they calm the food noise, they work on that mesolimbic system, that reward brain center. And so you don't get the same rewards from eating sweets or from even possibly drinking alcohol, those things that elicit that dopamine response.
I was just about to ask. It sounds much like a dopamine
Yeah,
type
it
response
100%
system.
is. So it just kind of calms those in general. And so secondary to all those, you're losing some weight. We always encourage the patients to track the calories, to focus on the lean proteins, the vegetables. You probably won't even want carbs. Like I have a hell of a lot of patients say, I'm not interested in carbs, and if I eat them, I feel terrible. I feel absolutely terrible. And so while you're using it, you start to develop these better habits so that once you hit that goal of dropping the body fat percentage or dropping the weight loss, you're able to use these as a tool. You're able to titrate or reduce your dose off of them and keep that weight off. As long as you stay, within that realm of calories you're consuming, as long as you keep the activity levels, as long as you keep the healthy eating habits. I have lots and lots of patients that are, they keep the weight off.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like, I was thinking about the dopamine thing. It almost sounds like it's preventing that reward system. I think you even mentioned that it almost kind of blocks or lessens that reward system from what you would typically are like hardwired for. People. I've never been necessarily I have a fairly addictive personality. Food's never been necessarily an addictive personality for me. I am naturally a high. I usually have a pretty high metabolism. I was like, 170 pounds is like a typical frame. So for me, it was gaining weight was the hard part when I started lifting and stuff like that. But other things, I understand vices 100%. I've been there more times than I'd probably like to talk about. But you realize that with any type of addiction, and a lot of people, have food addictions and whatnot, it seems like it's that reward system that allows them to keep coming back to it because it's what makes them, feel comfortable in an uncomfortable body, and it makes, you look at like people that go through trauma, a lot of times they'll turn to alcoholism or drugs or whatever it might be because it makes them feel comfortable when they're uncomfortable within themselves. So, being able to, it seems like they're stopping that reward from, overeating, whatever it might be, to help them, focus on making the right choices. Is that kind of like
It's not just that though. So Tony has more experience from volume of patients that he's worked with, right? I have personal experience because I was the one in the group that actually needed to lose the weight, right? And so from that perspective, you don't just like when you eat, you get this, you get a reward. Your blood sugar changes, right? You feel like you feel safe, right? You get that reward. When you're on this, you physically can't eat. You actually get penalized for overeating because you literally you feel that feeling when you go out to your favorite restaurant and you eat everything you can and you eat dessert and then you feel so stuffed that you can't move and you literally couldn't eat one more bite. You can get that same sensation and that same feeling at 1/10 of the volume of caloric intake. And so you don't want to take another bite.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, it's interesting on that same sort of anecdotal note. I was on GLPs for going on 4 or 5 months now. The biggest thing for me is that it actually introduced some of those lifestyle changes on its own. So I used to go hours at a time the entire day without having food because I noticed that food would make my work day less productive. So if I ate, it's brain fog city. I'm not going to be able to focus on anything, and I'm just lethargic, not focusing. So what would happen is at the end of the day, I would have a massive meal, overeat, stuff myself. Every single sugar thing possible was going in my mouth. On GLPs, that worked for about a week. But then after the week, I was so sick from intaking so much food all at once that it actually made me get up the next morning and go, even though I'm not starving right now, I'm actually going to have a little bit of a breakfast just so I can mitigate that insane hunger spike later and overeating and getting nauseous and feeling sick. So being on GLPs actually introduced the lifestyle change to me because I think, and Tony touched on this a little bit, I think after a while, whether you call it insulin sensitivity, whether you just call it poor eating habits over a decade, I think what ends up happening is you become desensitized to what you're actually putting in your body. With GLPs, you really notice what's going in you at all times. So for me, it actually made general lifestyle habits that I still stick to, even though I've been off GLPs now for 3 or 4 weeks, but I still have those same habits.
It makes sense because coming from a different aspect of it, I can connect with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because when I started, when I was younger, I started lifting weights, and I've said this on the podcast multiple times, was, one of the reasons that I started lifting so much and I was so kind of body centric is because I wanted to be physically strong. I wanted to feel good about myself. I wanted to look good because I didn't feel good inside.
Yeah.
So it was like, all right, what can I do to like help me out? And incidentally, it just started putting me down a path where it was, all right, well, I need to gain weight. So that means I need to take in more protein. I'm lifting. I'm doing all the things right. So it was like, all right, well, instead of that Snickers, I guess I'll eat a protein bar because there's 3 times as much protein in it.
Yeah.
And then I started getting away from eating fast food and incidentally making those kind of lifestyle changes. And then, be out doing whatever. And it's like, I need to get something to eat. I'll swing through Burger King, grab some food. And then, it's just a burger, some fries. And then like for the next 3 hours, I'm like, oh my God, I feel terrible.
Yeah.
So like, it seems like a very similar thing where if you can, whatever the trigger is to, take on that healthier lifestyle and kind of rewire, in a sense, your brain, eventually your body just starts falling into it as well. And then it makes it much harder to go back to what you're doing because it's like, oh, if I eat that, I'm going to feel like trash and I know it.
Yeah.
So to be able to provide somebody that has never experienced that way, but has lived an entire lifestyle of eating junk and not realizing, I think there's a lot of people out there, and I would guess that 99% of those, 70% of people in America that are obese, overweight, whatever it is, they don't realize how terrible they feel because they always feel terrible.
Yes. 100%.
And they've never felt good. So
exactly.
you never realize
it's
it.
Baseline.
Yeah, like when your baseline is crap,
Yep.
then so big deal.
This was fascinating. I have like my favorite pizza, right? And so there was one time several years ago, I was sick for 8 days and I couldn't move sick, right? I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink, I couldn't do anything for 8 days. And all I could intake was actually fruit, right? That was the only thing that actually like I was able to actually put into my stomach. And I was so excited when I finally felt better because I got to eat a pizza, right? Or what I would call real food, right? I ate that. It was the most rancid thing I've ever tasted because my body had my taste buds, everything had completely calibrated. And it's like it was rancid, but I kept on forcing it in. And then eventually it became status quo again and normal. So it's a reconditioning.
Yeah, unless you're like a bodybuilder where you're already used to this lifestyle, if you ask somebody to measure their food, look at every label, it's not ever going to be sustainable. You're not going to do it for longer than whenever the fad runs out. But with GLPs, I find myself way more in tuned with what I'm eating. I've read way more labels, not because I'm more neurotic, but because I know I have a finite amount of food that I'm going to be able to eat. I have to make sure that what I'm putting in makes sense.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of body response that comes with it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I've noticed too, and I always kind of circulate these to you guys, and patients send it to me all the time, is because it's so prevalent in the news. There's articles. It's like the hot topic right now. And I know you guys have seen countless articles, and you'll see CNN or you'll see, Fox News or whatever, and they'll blast an article on.
So we're using news lightly here.
Yeah.
He covered both ends of the spectrum.
I did.
Very politically correct.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But no, you'll see, the Ozempic face, the saggy face, or the Ozempic butt, the saggy butt. You'll see, what was the most recent one I got? It was 2 separate things in a CNN article that a patient sent me. She said, "Hey, what do you think of this? I need your opinion on this." And the one happened to do with surgery. And basically, they were saying that you want to stop the use of the GLPs about a week to 2 weeks in advance, which I had just spoken with a certified registered nurse anesthetist probably about 3 months ago, and she went through a class at the VA for anesthesiology, and they had said like 1 day at 24 hours in advance was good enough, but now they think it's like maybe a week or 2 weeks, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, it's going to stay in your system for up to 4 to 6 weeks, so you're still going to have that GLP activity. But they were worried about the delay in gastric emptying causing patients in surgery to vomit and then aspirate or kind of inhale those food particles down the trachea instead of the esophagus, which could be a very bad thing, into the lungs, pneumonia, things like that. And what was the other thing? It was gastroparesis. It was basically a slowing of motility through the intestines, the digestion through the intestines, so much so that one woman said, "I can't digest food." And my response was, hey, if you have to stop the medication going back to the surgery a week or two in advance, it's completely fine. If that's what anesthesia wants, it's okay. It's going to be in your system. My response to the gastroparesis was that the number one cause of that is from diabetics. This medication was originally and still is for diabetics. So wouldn't we see a mass incidence of this issue with gastric motility if diabetics already have it, if that's like the primary cause of it? And so it's not that these aren't side effects. It's not that these aren't happening to patients, because I think that they are. And that's literally why we have the entire process to rule out contraindications. That's why we have the 2 sets of eyes to go over all these things. But I think it's the hot topic right now. And it goes back to kind of telling the patients that hermeneutic of suspicion that, like, send me the articles. Let's go through these. There may be a small amount of legitimacy or even more legitimacy to those, but these are news stations. They're trying to get views. They're trying to sensationalize. I've treated thousands of patients. They've been on the market since 2005, Ozempic since 2017. You don't see this wide-reaching signaling of cancer. You don't see patients dying from these medications. Yes, you may see some nausea. You may see some GI upset. In incredibly rare instances, you may see, that gastroparesis. But ultimately, they've been very, very safe and very, very effective medications.
Yeah, so that's one, safe and effective. That you just triggered me a little bit, just to mess with you. I guess that's then an important piece too. Is I don't think there's anything that is not without
risk.
Risk and other
effects,
implications. Because some people can't drink milk.
Yeah.
Or you're gonna have a bad day, right?
Yeah.
I can take a half a gallon of milk to the face and I'd probably be just fine. Belly might hurt a little bit because that's a lot of milk, but. So I guess that what is there's obviously potential side effects, and then there's risk, and what is the holistic view of the severity of potential side effects too, because there's side effects and there's the severity of potential side effects, which can be 2 different, very, very different things, right?
Yeah.
So I guess maybe that's a good question too, is, how, the severity of these items, how severe can they be? And,
well, and against what you're solving for.
Yeah.
Right?
Big one.
Like,
right.
It's not just the severity of the side effects, but it's the severity of staying in the same patterns that you were in if you don't,
Yeah, no, for sure. But that's
So-
where, like, where does that fit on the spectrum? Because it's like, oh, like you talked about some side effects there that could be very serious. But is it like, oh, the potential of these serious side effects is 0.001% versus if you stay 200 pounds overweight your entire life, the severity of that of cardiac disease, all these other things, probably much higher. So
metabolic disease.
Stroke, the list of
diabetes.
there's probably what.
200.
Over 200.
Yeah, I'd say at least. Yeah, that's not a surprising number. So I guess that's a question to go along with this is, you said safe and effective, and you mentioned some side effects and risk there. But what do you think is the severity of those items for the typical person? I guess I know that's a really loaded question, but
less than 1%.
And with that, Toni has put Tony has put myself and several of his own family members and other friends on this as well. So it's not just Tony saying, this. Yeah. He's actually actioned what he's saying. My perspective, not talking medically, right? I am a patient. I was a severely obese person, right? Coming from that perspective, my weight was all consuming. It was literally every 4 seconds I thought about it. And I still have PTSD from it. So anything that I could have done, within reason that wouldn't, kill me, I would have done, because it debilitated my mind, and raised, the depression levels, anxiety levels. So for me, anything that I could do was worth it.
Yeah. And those two things, just depression and anxiety and your mental state alone can, I think there's a lot of things, at least personally, this is what I believe. I think not all anecdotal evidence should be tossed away. I think that's very important evidence, because that's, there's a lot of tests, scientific tests in labs and whatnot that scientists do on a bunch of different things, but how often do we get the rat's perspective?
Yeah, theory doesn't always translate to reality.
Sure, we have all the data, but how did the rats feel about this?
Yeah. Right.
We can't ask them, right? Yeah. So I think anecdotal evidence is too often cast aside. Without, I'm not saying that should be all encompassing. That's what we should go by, but I mean, lived experiences by people that can recognize these things and put their experience along with the data, I think is important as well, particularly when you're talking about health, because the mental aspect of it, stress, just stress alone that is not even physical. People have a tough time at work. They're stressed out. They're trying to do this, that, whatever. That can have serious medical implications when you're not, even if you're eating right, exercising, doing all the right things, a bad mental state can wreck your health just as easily.
And by the way, just on that same point, because it's that safe and effective thing is a trigger for me too. When I was in middle school and high school, GNC was selling pro hormones. So just so we're clear, just because you can go down to the store and buy something without a prescription or medical oversight doesn't make it safe.
Right.
There are side effects for pretty much everything. I say pretty much everything because I don't have time to think about everything right now.
You drink too much water, there's going to be a side effect. There's side effects to everything, yeah.
But with this, at least you have clinicians that genuinely care, like Tony, that are like overseeing the administration of what's happening. Because I know people who were using those GNC pro hormones that to this day it affects them.
Yeah, and even to that point, no matter how you feel about the FDA, they didn't have their hand. FDA didn't even look at most of the supplement. Right, supplements are not required to be diagnosed or not diagnosed, analyzed by the FDA. So it's like there's not even someone pretending to look at them. So that's also a good point.
I wanted to go back to what you were saying. That 1% that I was talking about was like severe side effects, less than 1%. So I would say that nausea maybe in that 5 to 10% range, higher in females. But it's typically not long lasting. Occasionally, too, secondary to that slowing in digestion. If someone has an underlying like esophageal reflux disease or acid reflux, that can be made worse or exacerbated. Right. So definitely things to look for. Going back to what you were saying, though, I think any good clinician should equally weigh empirical and anecdotal evidence. So,
no, it makes sense. Not every person fits into a data field, right? Precisely how you would expect them to.
I mean, I had almost all of the side effects that are listed, but I found it was because I was listening to my stomach in the beginning and not my brain. Yeah. And my brain says I need X amount of calories to function as a human being. So even though I'm not hungry, I need to take them in.
Yeah.
And so when I changed that, when I started listening to common sense, all of a sudden the side effects disappeared. They didn't exist.
Yeah. And I think there's also, I mean, I have, like I said in the beginning, I really don't know about any of this. I've heard it. I've, through passing, talking to Tony and hearing other people talk. But even as somebody that, eats pretty damn healthy, I'm more of I try to eat real food is kind of my thought. Like as least amount of ingredients in food as possible.
And you grow your own food.
We have
phenomenal garlic, by the way.
I have more. Yeah, we have.
I'll take some
tomatoes. I do a garden. I do chickens.
I'll take the tomatoes.
I get a we get locally raised beef
Beef.
and butchered. Like
Oh, wow.
I try to do all those things because I just realize, like, you look at the ingredients on some of these things. You go to the store,
Yeah.
pick up 90% of what's in a grocery store, and you're like,
it's like a
just-
giant page.
yeah, this is like a chemistry project.
Who wants their taint to shrink?
Yeah, so it's like, and even then, like, I'll wake up in the mornings, and if I'm hungry or whatever it is, like, I have times where, like, I wake up in the mornings and my stomach's like, I feel like I'm going to throw up. I don't have anything in it to throw up, but it's just when you change your diet and you start changing things around. Yesterday, we took the daughter and her friends out for a birthday party thing. So I realized I was busy all day, didn't really get to eat much. And I was like, oh man, like, we're going to be gone for a few hours. I threw some frozen chicken fingers in the air fryer, and I'm like, I am going to regret this. And sure enough, like, an hour later, I'm like, oh, I feel like a turd. But like, I needed something quick to run out the door. So it's like, when you're changing what you're eating and how your body processes those things, like, naturally, you're going to have some side effects, right? I mean, it's just your
Here's a
body's
super cool
processing all
thing,
those things.
and it's not for this session, but we have a chapter 2. So look, here's the reality, right? People try to regulate medicine and they do all this stuff. No one's regulating Burger King ads. No one's regulating Johnny Walker ads, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're so prevailing. There are some things that you can do to set up your body's natural counters to those things, so you don't have to feel disgusting when you eat chicken fingers.
Right.
But basically, like, and we'll talk about that later, but effectively, everything in moderation, right? And when the body's working the way that it's supposed to, it can handle those poisons.
Yeah.
Our body is designed to kick that stuff out, right? But we have stacked up so many things in our cells and, in our blood and our that our normal processing doesn't happen the way that it's supposed to.
Right. No, for sure. And I guess, to me, like I mentioned earlier, like, people don't realize how bad they feel because they always feel bad.
Correct.
So like, I feel great. And then you eat that like junk food, and I didn't feel terrible, but it was kind of like, oh, you get a little bit of, you're burping a little bit, like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that. But a lot of people live with that all day long. They're like, oh, popping, Tums and like all day long, drinking Pepto-Bismol just so they don't feel terrible.
Yeah.
It's
Perfectly fine that I take painkillers throughout the day.
Yeah, like, a lot of these things can be mitigated by just, all right, let's take a step back, and I've talked to a lot of people about health and nutrition and different things, and it's like, all right, well, I've known people that, like, they drink a 6-pack of Coke a day or like a 2-liter of Mountain Dew a day. Well, let's back it down to 1 liter, and and then maybe in a couple weeks we back it down a little bit more because your body's just not prepared for that shock, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say back it down to none liters.
Well, but it has to be
No, I know,
sustainable, right?
I'm
Is when you're
joking.
going through
I'm
life
joking.
changes, like,
No,
I know,
you're
I'm
right.
joking.
You're right, but that's the thing, right? Like, and that was the big deal for me. It's not that I couldn't do these things in doses, and it's not that I couldn't do a little bit or cut back a little bit, right? It was just this wholesale lifestyle change, right? That I knew that I needed.
Yeah.
That's almost impossible to pull off. And the coolest thing about Tb2, the coolest thing about like the GLPs, along with the lifestyle changes, is that effectively, like, it cleared the path to make that easy. Like, that was the thing. It was no longer a struggle to do the things I knew I was supposed to do.
Right.
Because I couldn't physically take in the calories. And when I did take in calories, they had to be good ones. Otherwise, I was going to feel like shit. And it was simple, and it's as simple as that. And the thing that it's kind of interesting because, like, people will talk about the struggle, right? Like the struggle of dieting or, all those things. But here's the thing that I think might blow everybody's mind that I don't think I've said out loud is I actually eat and drink whatever I want to now.
Yeah.
When my body tells me I need sugar or, carbs or whatever,
Intuitive
I
eating.
actually just eat whatever I want to now. So actually, it sounds crazy. I eat 1/3 the calories I used to, but my freedom is 10x more because I never feel guilty about eating something, right? And I get to eat what I want when I want. The coolest thing is that my body's just been reconditioned that it doesn't need to take in so much and it doesn't crave the shit as often as it used to.
Right.
So that to me is the most profound impact and that's why I call it the cheat code is because I knew I was supposed to do this stuff all along, right? But it was really, really hard.
Yeah.
And what it did for me is make it really, really easy.
Yeah.
So that's my difference.
Yeah.
I think so good.
So I was just gonna say, going off of that, like every single diet works as long as you're like restricting calories. They all work. But it's the adherence rate to the actual diet that's just like abysmal. This for me just made it so that no matter what the diet was, whatever the flavor of the month is, keto, carnivore, paleo, whatever it is, it's compatible with all of them because no matter what, you just are satiated faster. And that was the biggest thing that made everything else easier.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I can connect with that. It makes sense because now, like I talked about how I kind of started, initially eating healthier as a lifestyle. And you talk about the cheat code, where it kind of makes me think of, coding in a software in a sense where it's, the cheat code would be real simple, real quick. You put this in, input, and it's boom, changed. Whereas, creating a software, writing code, it takes a long time.
Sure.
And to kind of recode, if you look at the human body like that, to recode your body to someone that is eating that quote unquote healthy lifestyle, whatever it is, it takes a long time to develop that intuitive eating capability, because I'm at the same place now where like I can eat whatever I want, but I eat a cupcake, eat a bowl of ice cream. And when I'm done, I'm like, whew, okay, I'm good on ice cream for a little bit, but then there's times where I'm like, I just need some potatoes and a giant steak. And then I eat, it's like, oh, okay, that was good. But if you've never been able to recognize those things, having something that's able to propel you. I mean, like I said, it's safe and it's, there's proven ways that it doesn't destroy your body and always and if it helps you that quickly, why not?
Yeah.
Right. If you have the capabilities, like, well, why not try to get to a healthier lifestyle as quick as possible?
Well, and that's why we did it. I mean, personally, I saw the benefit, and Tony told me how many, thousands of people he's helped over the years, and, combined with misinformation. I mean, that's why we created this, and that's why we're excited. And we, like I've told these guys, people who are on GLP-1s, whether they're on GLP-1s with our program or others, they need accessibility to our information because we genuinely want to change and shift the paradigm in America. It will take so much pressure off of so many things that are wrong in our country. And I don't think people understand how prevailing weight loss and obesity, being overweight and obesity are. So
yeah, I think that's an important point too, is, we talked about educating people. And once they start realizing all of the issues and why they're there and what the full scope of what's going on, not only with across the nation, but in your own body, when you realize like what you're doing to it, and you can start connecting, all right, well, I feel like this because of this. And, there's all these different health complications in our country because of this. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the new stats recently where the US, it's compared to most, first world countries now, we've dropped like 5 years off of our life expectancy. Everyone else is still kind of slowly climbing, and the 80s, they're creeping up there. And then within the last like 10 years, you see the US was right along, and then we just started dropping down, and obesity rates and all these other conditions are just continuing to climb. It's like, well, what's doing that?
Make no mistake, the hospitals do not like this. The drug companies don't like this.
Well, drug companies don't like anything that gets you healthy, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the thing.
Unless they're the ones specifically selling it.
Specifically, but even then,
yeah, it's not accessible
even then,
available.
with all their other drugs, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's one line of product, right, versus all of their products. I mean, this, like, when I say over 200 comorbidities, like, that is a staggering number.
Yeah.
That, I mean, okay, so I was in come on.
Costa Rica?
No, Bahrain. No, I wasn't in
Kuwait.
Bahrain. No, come on, the good Dubai.
The
Bye.
good. Well, that one out. Here, go on.
Wait, what's the one with the Burj Al Arab?
Yeah, it's the way.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I was in Dubai. You can edit all that out.
Yeah, it's got.
I was in Dubai when COVID launched. Okay.
Oh,
I was
I didn't
in
know that.
Dubai, and the first 2,000 people had passed because of COVID. Okay.
Oh.
My daughter was with me. All right. So there was no way I was getting on that plane if I'm going to risk my daughter dying. Right? No way. I would have stayed in Dubai for a year, 2 years, whatever it was. Right? Even though I was staying at the Burj Al Arab, that would have been super expensive.
Yeah.
Right? But there was no way I was going to put my daughter in an unsafe situation. And so I literally, before we left on a plane back to America, I researched every single one. I dove into every single of the first 2,000 people who died from COVID, right?
Yeah.
Every single one. There was not one person of the 2,000 that died of COVID alone. Not one of them.
Yeah.
90% of the first 2,000, it was COVID and then obesity.
Yeah.
Right? Was the number two factor. And then there was cardiovascular respiratory issue. And literally every single one, practically of the 2,000, at least had two. No one had one. And almost all of them had three or four.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized my daughter and I can get on that plane.
Yeah.
Like we're okay.
I think
So,
that's a big thing, particularly with recently over the past couple of years, that more and more people, that's really what started this podcast was COVID. And it started really pushing me down an entirely different life path of really recognizing the facade that is over everything, right? And the news, how we talked about, they pushing these stories. And now it's, instead of seeing the story and going, oh no, it's why is this a story? Why are they wording it like this? Why are they saying it like this? And I think a lot of people are starting to recognize that, along with COVID and the comorbidities that came along with the COVID complications, right? The vast, vast majority of people that I know that had a difficult time with COVID wasn't their only problem.
age,
Overweight,
overweight.
weight is the top, I think what was it, like 85% of, roughly, like 85% of the people that have died from COVID were also overweight.
Right.
And then like, was it like 70% of them had like vitamin D deficiencies?
Yeah.
It's
So like all
not-
like,
yeah.
so it's like, there's all these things you go,
It's not coincidence.
yeah, it's not a coincidence. Like this is because your body's sick. Your body's fighting it. Your
Correct.
body's trying to fight to stay alive constantly, just day to day. And
Right.
then you throw something that
Correct.
compounds that.
Right.
Okay. It makes sense.
And
So
I'm
like,
not a doctor, so I don't get to say it officially, but I agree.
yeah, I mean, I just saw it. Like COVID went, I know Toni, I had it multiple times, and it was like, yeah, this kind of sucks, but I've had worse.
I had it 3 times.
Yeah. And it's like, okay. Like,
Three
and
times.
it
Yeah.
lingered. I think the only thing with COVID probably that I saw differently was it seemed to like the fatigue
Yeah.
lingered a little bit longer than typical,
Depending on the strand, but
sicknesses. But I saw that a couple, I had it one time where it was like for 3 weeks, it was kind of like, I'm still just kind of tired. But otherwise it was like, I'm going to the gym. I'm doing all the things I got to do. Like, and there might be a couple days where I'm like, this isn't fun.
By the way,
But-
I think the takeaway isn't like anything about COVID. I think the takeaway is if people took this as seriously as they took COVID, this being obesity,
Yeah.
which is a far more ever-reaching problem, far more
Yes.
research and data to back up how dangerous it is, I think you would wake up tomorrow in a far healthier world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the vision with TB2 is get people to understand how dangerous this really is. Even if it's, you aren't morbidly obese, but you are overweight and have struggled with that for a decade, 2, 3, that is having real health ramifications and impact on you today, whether that's psychological, physiological, whatever it may be. So, yeah.
Well, and think about this from this perspective, right? Like a lot of times when people are overweight, they may not care as much about their their longevity of life.
Right.
But I can tell you, as somebody who's been severely overweight, as somebody who's not severely overweight, your whole perspective on life changes
Sure.
when that weight goes away. And I heard a stat one time that men think about sex like once every 7 seconds. Well, I can tell you, I thought about my weight way more than that.
Oh.
Right.
So it was, it was debilitating.
Yeah, I believe that. It's same with like mental health issues, any of those things.
Yeah.
If you're carrying something around with you, whether it be physical or non,
Right.
that's weighing you down constantly, you're thinking about it. And it's not only is it maybe physically destroying you, but it's when it's a reciprocal, thing, right? The more you mentally destroy yourself, the more you physically destroy yourself.
Yep.
The more you physically destroy yourself mentally, and it's just constant loop where a lot of people they don't realize maybe they don't even realize they're in it.
Yeah.
But they're stuck, and they don't know how crappy they feel until you feel good. And I guess that's the thing with COVID that you mentioned that blew my mind was there's so many things out there that are destroying people's lives, and nobody seems to care about those. Whether it be the fentanyl, the overdose epidemic, all these things. Like,
let me give you an even more common one. Okay, go to a party and don't drink.
Yeah.
How much pressure do you get from everybody to have a beverage?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, wow, that's social. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why aren't you like?
Yeah,
right?
and I'm a drinker. I like my bourbon. I like having a beer, but there's plenty of times where like I'll go and people are like, oh, like you just random people that are just, come on, have a drink. I'm like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like,
no.
I'm actually driving. Like, so
it's not even that, like, it's not socially, these pressures, everything drives you to this consumption, right? Because that's where the money's at, right? I love the perspective of like, if people took, obesity as seriously as they took COVID, right?
Yeah, and they should. I mean, you look at statistically, at all the top health problems that we have out there.
The data is crazy.
Even if there are cases that individual person isn't tied to overweightness, but they're all, the vast majority of them are tied. Was it cardiac health is the top killer?
Yep.
And then there's the top 3 are all directly connected for the most part to carrying around just too much weight. It's like, folks, we're killing ourselves day by day.
So I'm going to switch gears, and maybe this is a little too emotional with a room full of men who like bourbon. But one of the things that I loved about the GLP experience the most, I am pretty drug averse, mostly, and
retake.
That's fine. That's fine. Go ahead and laugh at it. It's okay. This is all staying in.
I forgot to mention that.
This is all staying in.
I don't edit anything.
Yeah, this is all staying in.
It's a start stop.
So
I'm sorry.
So mostly drug averse. Go on. But so my whole thing in not taking anything that was like weight loss related, whether it's CVS, GNC, Vitamin Shop, some other specialty weight loss thing, was I wanted to know at the end that I've done it. And that's like a weird emotional thing, because if you reach your goal, who cares? With GLPs, what I found? It is you actually doing the action. It is you actually saying, I am no longer hungry. I don't want to eat. And you could, theoretically, continue eating, even if you don't want to, or if you make that choice beyond what whatever GLPs you have. So with GLP, the biggest thing that I, psychologically for me, was at the end of the day, whatever the weight loss was, whatever the better diet was, whatever the better lifestyle choices were, they really felt like they were my choices. I made the choice. I made the difference. I made the change. Which I don't think that you have that same level of ownership over your health if you're going a surgical route. If you're going something more extreme, or that works in a different way that isn't necessarily working off your satiety or getting you back to baseline. So today, I've been off of GLPs for a few weeks now. I have a very healthy relationship in jumping back on or jumping off as needed or as my clinicians approve, because it's not necessarily that I am fundamentally changing who I am or I'm going under the knife for surgery, but it's realistically just giving me a bit more discipline to stick to what I want to do anyway. So that for me was a huge piece in it. Giving you that psychological power is really big. I want to be able to look in the mirror and go, I did this, as opposed to there's 100 different things I'm putting in my body that did this.
So in the beginning, my power over it was the fact that I got over my, that I don't like needles, right? And that I was willing to give myself this shot that I knew that would suppress my appetite and would suppress like my desire for things that I enjoy and like, right? But over time, I realized that empowerment that you're talking about, and that it was my decision. And because I learned what my body actually needed to sustain itself. Now I learned what my body actually wanted. And that gave me a complete power. And so when I was going off of them, it was very easy for me to sustain because I had taken the power away from the GLP and I owned it myself.
Yeah.
I think if you don't own it, it's never going to perpetuate.
Exactly.
Because I've known people that they've got, you know, their stomach staple, this, that, they've done it, whatever. But and I've known both paths where the people that did that and then they took ownership.
Yeah.
And they continued on down that path where they continued on a healthier lifestyle. But I've also known people that they didn't take ownership of it and they've gotten it done twice. They've got, you know, and then they still gain the weight back, this, that, whatever. So it's being able to take ownership of that is
that extreme obesity ownership, bro.
Just, I mean, any type of ownership with anything. And some people it's, you know, it's their kids, you know, or it's their husband or wife. They look at them and go, oh, I got to do this for them.
Yeah.
Like if even if I don't have the power to do it for myself, like what else, like where can I find that strength from? Right. And I think there's a common thread there amongst people that stick with it. They take ownership in some way, shape or form to be responsible to themselves.
So we're launching the 7-second campaign. Get rid of obesity, get back to sexual thoughts every 6 seconds.
6 seconds. Okay.
So,
which is also good exercise. Just saying.
I found that it's a perfect complement to working out. Yeah. If you are doing that regularly and working out, like that's when
the calories really come off.
Yeah. The hormone balance, you get the cardiac work. It's all fits together. Right. Right.
The dopamine system.
It's
great.
Yeah. And it's a good reward, right? As long as, you know, you're,
because it's ownership. You put the work in.
You put the work
it's great.
In. Right. Tony, I don't know what time. I know you said you had to get going.
Yeah, about 3. So anything else you want to add?
Not at the moment. I had one other thing, but it will come back. I'll put it in the comments.
Cool.
Well, I appreciate
next podcast. It's going to be entirely about Tremblown, I assume.
Hey, I'm here for it.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I'll see you then.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys giving us a little bit of your thoughts, and we'll check back up once everything's up and rolling. Maybe that'd be a good time.
Okay, I'll call you back. Literally. Bye.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for joining us today. Remember, check out the website, chronic-curiosity.com, to join us at the forum, have some fun, interaction, pick you up a comfy t-shirt, or if you just want to support the show and donate, all that is on the website as well. Thank you. Until next time.
See you.